What was your school's faculty secret? Our high school librarian and business teacher were in a same-sex relationship and lived together. Nobody cared. This was mid-1960s. One of our male teachers took in a girl student from an abusive home and she lived with him for the rest of senior year with his wife. After she graduated, he divorced his wife and married the former student. They're still together to my knowledge. Also, this wasn't like a getting with the hot young teacher thing. He was a homely man in his 50s. He was later fired for a similar situation that happened years prior after the previous student came forward. Also, apparently our teachers had their own most likely list that featured gems like most likely to get to life sentence and most likely to fall for a Ponzi scheme. Back in high school, we had a campus similar to a college campus. Instead of one large building, it was several buildings laid out. One building was dedicated to math, another for science, etc. Anyway, there were tunnels built underground that connected all the buildings that no one was allowed to use. Only faculty members knew where and how to access them. Evidently, they were built during the Cold War in case the United States was under attack. A shocking percentage of the senior class was sleeping with teachers. Very small school. 2 male teachers ducked the married school psychologist. She remarried one of them after she left the school. Our teacher's staff room always smelled like pot. They always denied smoking pot. They smoked a lot of pot. Spent most of high school wanting to become an art teacher because they sat around listening to The Cure and looking cool and indifferent. Their staff room was in a small dark building at the end of campus and looked really grunge. One time we were loudly talking outside their window, and an art teacher came out to tell us to move along because we were ruining their jam session. My 3rd grade teacher, MR.V, was gay. Not a big deal now, but in a small town in Michigan in 1973, coming out was not exactly an option. The thing is, he was everyone's favorite teacher. Kind, caring, enthusiastic, funny, and really good at his job. We called him MR.V because his last name was too hard for 3rd graders to pronounce, something like Veselovsky, and he eventually had his last name legally changed to V. Many years later when I was on a break from college in the 80s I went out to dinner with him and his friend, and it dawned on me, oh, MR.V is gay. Pretty sure the faculty knew, and probably the more observant parents, but if I remember correctly it was never an issue. The head of the English department was a lunatic who barely taught. I was in his AP English class, and we never finished getting through any of the books we were supposed to be reading. Instead, we would get long lectures on whatever the hell he felt like rambling about. On the mild end was descriptions of his World of Warcraft obsession. On the crazier end was him. 1. Holding an imaginary D over his crotch and using it to slice imaginary bread. 2. A statement about how women were going to cause the end times because we refused to have enough children to sustain the world. 3. Oversharing about how his female students reminded him of old flames. Your name is Sarah? Sarah was the name of my first love. 4. Ranting endlessly about his 2 divorces, including telling us once that if he'd owned a gun during divorce number 2, his ex-wife and all of her friends would be dead. And yet for whatever reason, we all just accepted that that was how he was, even the AP kids. Since, if nothing else, he was a lenient grader. I looked him up recently and he has since retired, and his Twitter profile lists him as retired teacher, twice divorced. I live in a small town and any big secrets are usually spread like a wildfire. There used to be this 6th grade special ed teacher, we'll call him MR.H, that looked super creepy. There would always be new rumors about him and all the girls stayed away from him and called him a pedo. But again they were rumors so none of them were confirmed. About 2 years later, I'm in junior high and I have forgotten about MR.H. It's the middle of winter and I have just arrived at the school and already something feels wrong. There were teachers whispering with folders held up to their mouths and everything. Nobody found out what happened until some kid overheard the conversation between 2 teachers. Turns out MR.H had a string of touching underage girls and boys. MR.H was promptly fired and they tried to arrest him but he fled the state and was never found again. Now, I'm in high school and the rumors are now flying with another 6th grade teacher. One of the teachers was there her first year out of college and was secretly dating a senior boy. Right after graduation they started dating publicly. 1. Freshman year math teacher, a woman, had 2 dads. I don't remember how it got brought up, but she told us and immediately regretted it. Those immature kids ended up making her quietly cry at her desk. She moved away soon after that. I felt bad the rest of the day even though I wasn't a part of it. 2. Senior year math teacher was a RIT teacher. Just didn't teach whatsoever. Sat at her desk all class and gave us crosswords. She had a good sense of humor though and was horsing around with a kid in class and punched him in the chest. The kid is a D and goes to tell administrators she punched him, so she got her stuff and left before he could. We just didn't have a teacher the rest of the day. She never came back to work after that. The English teacher and the social studies teacher had the hots for each other. The vice principal would sometimes get so wound up in his lectures about God and country he would start crying. The girls' gym teacher was gay. 2 married teachers worked at the high school. The wife was hot and the dude looked like a ducking toad. The dude paid my 16-year friend $35 once a week to mow his lawn and duck the wife while he watched from the closet. It never came out. Eventually she divorced him and moved away. My psych teacher was the baseball coach for over the 8 years, winning the division title almost every year. Out of the blue he gets fired with no explanation from the school. Turns out he ducked one of the players' mom and the school found out somehow. I heard about it from an ex-teacher that I stumbled on during vacation. Edit. For clarification, the mom was married and the coach teacher was in a relationship. At the school my wife once taught at, the principal was very much of the mind that if you were a young female teacher, you were supposed to adore him at all times. She didn't really play that game, and so he kept writing her up for the smallest infractions. He was also very quick to remind the teachers that he knew people in the town, and was thus immune to all retribution. And then he was caught, quite literally, having an affair with the wife of someone who worked in central office. About 20 years later now, he's still managing the gas station that's right down the road from the school. I went to a Catholic school despite not being Catholic. One of the religion teachers got married and had a kid 5 months later. After some math they fired her. Well, my math teacher had a secret. He had placed hidden cameras in the girls' locker rooms and bathrooms. It's not a secret anymore, so needless to say he's in prison now, haha. Each year the school would take the year 7 students, first year of high school, on a ski trip. The year I went, me and my friend were put in a hotel room where our balcony directly overlooked the balcony of a teacher who I'll call Mr. C. One night me and my friend went out onto the balcony in the middle of the night and saw Mr. C and another teacher, who we'll call Miss J, full on making out in the room. Curtains were wide open. Lights were on. We could see everything. Of course, the next morning at breakfast we told all the other students around, one of whom was dumb brave enough to ask Miss J how long her and Mr. C had been together. Both teachers denied it flatly, and when the trip was over we had an assembly where our head teacher asked us all to stop sharing the baseless rumors from the trip. Told us that Mr. C and Miss J were colleagues and nothing more. Fast forward 7 years, my year graduates, so all students from that trip were no longer in the school. And the following term the school sends home a letter informing parents that Miss J will now be going as Mrs. C. We later found out the 2 teachers had gotten drunk and hooked up on the trip exactly as we'd expected, and later got married. My photo teacher, who looked like Elvis, was banging a 17-year-old student. That wasn't a secret very long. Everyone thought the high school history teacher was gay. He was rarely ever seen with his wife and would bring other men to school events. Turns out, Osaive men were actually pimps and he was busted in a motel sting for prostitution. A teacher and principal were in the closet making babies and I saw one of the babies and the baby looked at me. This isn't actually a secret, but rather a rumor that went around school that was a secret for a while. But this year an art teacher at my school walked in one day very disoriented and red-eyed. He was pulled out by the vice principal and wasn't seen again for several months. During this time lots of rumors circulated that he came to school high and had weed in his car, and this went on for a while. We had a long-term sub and no one knew what was going on, until one of my friends revealed to me that the gym teacher confirmed those rumors. Turns out, we were all wrong. Poor guy got into a car accident and got a concussion and came into school that day anyway. He spent months in the hospital recovering. That the reason that computer accounts and security and general IT stuff was a mess was that the old IT guy intentionally complicated things for the sake of job security, and that complication could not save him when the cops found CP on his computer. So he was arrested and nobody knew how the system was set up. So they scrambled for years to keep things working. At one point all the seniors had permission to see not only their own individual files, but also all freshman files. The new IT people, several years after taking on this mess, didn't seem to know this was happening. Lots of teachers, staff, and students be ducking. A teacher at our high school was featured on America's Most Wanted. He was a cop that had sexually assaulted a woman during a traffic stop. He had gotten the job at our high school using his brother's identification. I was sitting at home watching the show and told my grandma he was a teacher at our school. She told me I was crazy. The next day we had an assembly and a note was sent home to the parents. The shop teacher was a raging alcoholic and the music teacher liked to grab girls by the boobies. No one cared. It was the 80s. Will probably get buried, but a girl in my class. Her mum was the head teacher of quite a prestigious private school, our school, and her father was the English teacher. Her father had an emotional affair with a student a couple of years older than us. Was writing her love letters and keeping a diary. Student finally told someone what happened, and because nothing sexual had happened, he just lost his job and put himself into a mental health facility. They got divorced soon after. Girl went on to be head girl and head teacher left the position. A teacher was once caught playing porn on his projector. Also, if you're Turkish like most of the admin, you get paid more and things actually change when you report them. The running total of how many teachers the principal has slept with. I know of 7 teachers and a nurse. There are lonely others. Untouchable because he gets the numbers. But what a sleaze. In 6th grade, I had an amazing literacy teacher. He seemed genuinely happy to teach us and never called us out for stupid questions, unless they were about farts. He despised fart jokes for some reason. One day, for the first time, he was absent and we had a substitute. Most kids just assumed he was sick or maybe his baby daughter was sick and went on with their day. But when he didn't show up for 2 more weeks, we all got worried. He showed up for his final day tired looking and cold. He didn't have any emotion in his voice and he lacked the usual spark he had. He never taught at our school again. Nobody knew what happened until I finally got the nerve to ask the, especially honest, vice principal. She told me the truth, which was that he told his wife of 7 years that he was actually gay and had never truly loved her, divorced her, had a mental breakdown over losing his daughter, drove to a town nearly 5 hours away, broke into a house, and got arrested. This was the weirdest and most insane thing I've ever heard, but it was true. I moved away after 6th grade and I don't know if anybody else ever found out, but it was kept pretty secret while I was there. Wasn't even a secret, but I went to school in Middle Tennessee and in I think 2nd or 3rd grade I got a day off because the janitor killed his family and they were afraid he was hiding in one of the schools. My male and married HS history teacher was sleeping a student in my class. They got married right after she graduated and he secured his divorce.